My name is Emily Krafcheski. I work at the Washington County Heritage Center as a site manager. So I do research, I plan all of our events, I work on our exhibits, and get to talk with people about history. The St. Croix Boom Company was really important to the logging industry because as these logs were coming down the river, they needed to be organized. They sorted them out into the different companies and then lashed them together to make these rafts and then send them further on down the river to be processed and milled and all of that good stuff. So it was a huge source of employment for people, and it was a way when white settlers moved here that they could find employment and provide for their families. Some of those younger guys especially, they really wanted to take on some of those high-flying jobs and have a little bit of dangerous element, I suppose you could say, to their employment. I think that there's so much rich history from the lumber companies because so many people got their start there and so many places today have their roots in the lumber industry, and that's an amazing thing. And to think about people who came over specifically to work for these lumber companies, they weren't even necessarily Americans yet. They didn't speak the language, but they found their home here, and a lot of people continue to stay here. And even if they didn't, it was important that they were here to begin with. So I think that story of coming over across the pond, so to speak, and finding your way and just gritting your teeth and getting it done and finding community is something that we can all relate to. I mean, so many people, you have to get out of your comfort zone in order to grow, and that's exactly what these folks were doing. Well, the logging industry did have a huge impact on environmentalism. There wasn't really even a term for environmentalism yet because they saw it as a way to make money and use natural resources in seemingly unending supply. And then after a while, it was like, shoot, well, we cut down all the logs, now we have to move on. Back when they were doing all of this logging, it was a means to an end, it was a source of employment. They weren't thinking long-term about what's going to happen to this land after we use everything up. And you can see that in a lot of different industries. It's just very obvious with the logging industry. So it was just this industry that moved all the way across the United States as supplies ran out. But in terms of cutting down the forest and stuff, they really did it all. And after a while, they ran out of logs and had to move on. Nowadays, of course, there are many, many more trees. You don't see all those bald hills everywhere, but it's taken a long time to get to that point and restore some of those forest areas. I know over the years that there have been some movements to restore forest areas. I think especially in the 60s and 70s. There's always been environmentalists. There's just been larger movements of it at certain periods of time. So you have some of those movements happening in the latter part of last century, and people are very interested in taking the land, appreciating the land, and restoring it. So some of those movements have happened over time, but a lot of times nature has just come in and restored it on its own. So it's really interesting to go to some of those areas now and see some really big old trees because, again, they cut down everything and then they moved on, and then nature had its way and started growing tall trees again. So it's been a long time that some of those have had means to grow. Basically, the last log came down the river in 1914, so it's been a long time that things have been able to grow. So I think there's more of a modern mentality of not what can the land do for me, but what can I do for the land. It's more of a modern mindset, and thank goodness for it, because otherwise we would have no natural resources at all. I also think people in this area have such a unique appreciation for history. They want to know, where can I go to learn more about the history of this area? What's been preserved? What can I go and see and feel like I am a part of? And what can I learn from the past? And so people really enjoy going out to see something historical and finding out what was here before them. And I think that's a wonderful attribute to have. I think it is a tough tightrope balance of preserving things and also making them accessible, because people do feel like they want to have access to things and feel like they're really immersed in that history. I think that there's a lot to be said for ways that you can interpret a historical site that allow people to feel like they understand the whole picture without them being able to have wear and tear on what the item actually is. I think the Parks Department in Washington County does a really good job of interpreting sites and allowing people to feel like they have that experience and take those memories with them without allowing to literally take a piece of it with them. So having really good signage, having photos of the past that they can get a sense of what it used to look like, all of that stuff goes into interpretation and making it feel real to them without having that wear and tear. The importance of preserving these sites really can't be underestimated. It is so important to know where we've been to find out where we are currently and where we could go eventually. My hope is that people will visit the site and have a real appreciation of the hard work that these folks put in to create the town, essentially. Stillwater would not be here if not for the lumber industry and the river. And so I hope that people recognize that, and I hope that they feel like they are a part of that history. And what I hope they take away is that appreciation, and also an appreciation to do better environmentally and appreciate the history of what got us here in the first place and how to preserve that and continue that. My hope is that the environmental and ecological side and the historical side can continue to be a really nice partnership, because I think it is a unique aspect of this area. We use the river for all of this industry, and now it's sort of being reclaimed in some ways and enjoyed by all of the folks in the area. So I'm hoping that those can continue to work together and create some interpretive opportunities. And when I say interpretive, that means signage, maybe mini exhibits, things that can exist outside for the long term, and tell both of those stories because they go together so nicely and they're both so very important. I think one of the best ways to approach a historic land site is the old adage, take only pictures, leave only footprints. And what that says is get the fullest out of your experience, but don't leave anything behind. So if you are going down and having a picnic on the side of the river, fantastic, love it. Pick up your trash, not too hard. There's ways to appreciate the caves, but don't scratch your name into it. Kind of just those base level things where you can go and use the land and enjoy the land and appreciate the land, but don't leave anything behind that's gonna live on after you, essentially. There are a lot of organizations that organize river cleanups, so just going along and helping pick up trash, that's something that you can do that's very easy to give back to the land. There's also, in those organizations, tree plantings that happen every so often. You can get involved with different environmental groups in the area. The Washington County Parks are a great example. There's lots of different ways to give back while still being able to take a picnic, walk around. It doesn't have to be, just because it's a historic site doesn't mean that you can't visit it and that it's shut off in a corner. You should be able to experience it within reason. There is kind of a relatively true in some areas stereotype with history that it needs to be locked away and preserved and only seen under the cover of darkness. And there is an element to preservation that does have that aspect, that there's so much history that needs to be enjoyed and a lot of people who want to help others enjoy it. Just having the idea that history isn't something to be locked away, but is supposed to be interacted with and enjoyed and immersified, essentially, and have an experience with history that isn't going into a dark room and looking at old documents. All of that's very important too. But if you can get out there and see things when you're out and about that really give you a sense of place and your point in history, I think all of that can be really appreciated and really used. Even though there is a lot to be said about keeping things away for preservation, there's also so many ways that you can share it with the public to be enjoyed. And I am very passionate about that myself. I love to see people getting out and saying, oh, that's what this building used to be, or oh, you know, the land kind of used to look like this, and now there's been some erosion or some environmental changes, and now it looks this way. And being able to have that information just gives you such a sense of pride in the community too. We have this amazing resource of the St. Croix waterway, and being able to appreciate appreciate that from a historical perspective as well as an environmental perspective is such an exciting opportunity. The Washington County Heritage Center is such a great space because we can tell so many stories. It's essentially a blank slate. So the idea was to create a neutral space museum that can tell more stories. And the lumber industry, that was a no-brainer. I mean, so many people's families came to this area so that they could find jobs in the lumber industry. And so a lot of things that you see, even in downtown Stillwater today, sort of spring off of that. There are even still companies that have specific ties and got their start in the lumber industry and are now much larger companies, family foundations. So we wanted this to be a more permanent exhibit because of all of those ties. It's such a huge part of the history. This is going to be an exhibit for a very, very long time. Everyone come out and come visit the Washington County Heritage Center. I'm biased, but it's a really great museum. It's great for all ages. It's very, very accessible. And we have this great gem here. Come out and see us.